I want to know everything there is to know about you.
I am going to introduce me.
You must have spotted her by now. She's always there.
Don't I deserve love?
Somebody has to like me best.
Hello and welcome to the Don't Know Her podcast. I am Scott.
And I'm Michael.
And we are here again to celebrate a treasure of the screen, someone who we think deserves all the love in the world, and this week is absolutely no exception to that. And we have chosen this week's special lady because it's another special lady, special day. Happy birthday, Michael!
Well, thank you. And actually, on the day we're recording, it's a very special lady's birthday, and it's my mother's birthday. So my birthday is coming up shortly enough. But yes, my actual mum's birthday today.
Oh my God,
actual
happy birthday,
my
Mum.
mum's actual birthday is what I mean to say. So yeah, having a lovely day, I hope. So yes, I am here to talk about someone else that we have chosen to celebrate for a really successful 2022. That is Lesley Manville. And of course, we spoke about Lesley before. I mean, I'm sure we talk about Lesley often.
I
she's
think
the sort of person that I...
all the time.
So like with Diane Lane's episode, we would have spoke about her in relation to Let Him Go. We focused on Let Him Go and Lesley's performance in this Oscar special we did where we were championing her really like being snubbed for Best Supporting Actress because she definitely should have been in that race. And I'm sure like when we talked about Imelda Staunton or any sort of British person that's been anywhere near a Mike Leigh film, Lesley must have come up.
Yes, so she has been mentioned on this podcast more than any of the actual people we've spoken about so far. So congrats on getting, finally at episode 44, your very own spot.
Yes, welcome to the club, Lesley. We know we've teased you, but you're fully fledged member of the Don't Know Her clan now.
Oh, she has been waiting. I bet she has been sick at nights thinking that it might never happen. But... well, we know you've been feeling this way, Lesley, and we're here to support because we love you. And Michael couldn't possibly imagine a birthday not celebrating you. So here we are.
Exactly. And like, so Lesley's 2022, to just give a little recap, she's had Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which is this charming film that has more grit to it than you might imagine and has been very successful in independent cinemas in America and internationally, which is fantastic for her. Her first big lead role in a, let's say, more commercially minded film, as well as taking the mantle of Princess Margaret. For a second, my mind went blank. I was like, is she still a princess? Because everything has changed. It's like fucking Game of Thrones here in the UK. And I keep calling people different things. But Princess Margaret's long dead, so she must just still be Princess Margaret. And yeah, so before her, of course, Vanessa Kirby was in the first two seasons, then Helena Bonham Carter in the next two, and now we have Lesley as Margaret. And even I, who am not a royalist, clearly, and also don't really like The Crown, I think it's a bit dull, I did watch the episode that's focused on her Margaret in this season, and lovely. Like, I think she's really good. Lovely's the wrong word, but it's just nice to spend time with her being given, like, such a huge platform, because, you know, like, imagine the amount of people watching that and nailing it and really playing what we will talk about quite a lot, kind of a lot of things that you come to expect of Lesley Manville, kind of a brittle strength to her, you know, a lonely character in many ways, glamorous, sexy, surprisingly so at moments, and she also gets to act with Imelda Staunton, so why the hell would she not join that show? And I hope she gets paid a crazy amount of money. And it opens all these doors. So, like, she's having a fantastic year.
Yeah, no, it's a very exciting time to talk about Lesley. She is the moment. I mean, she's been the moment for us for a long, long time. But truly, I think now so many people will be talking about her. So much people who probably, if they hadn't seen her perform before in anything, will be getting the chance now and then be awoken to go back and visit what is a treasure trove of some really, really special work.
Yeah, and like we'll get into the details of Leslie's career, focusing on her film career, but she hasn't made as many films as you would imagine of someone like Lesley Manville. It really seems to have focused on TV and mostly a lot of stage work, but it's, in the last few years, it seems to really be blossoming, let's say, into a really varied and really exciting film career. And the films that she is choosing to do are usually exciting, or they're Maleficent, which I assume are paying for her house and stuff.
Yes.
Her fabulous lifestyle.
Yeah, well, hey, why not? If there's any reason to do Maleficent, it's the mortgage.
Pays the mortgage, but we also, again, she's with Imelda Staunton and Juno Temple being these fairies, and sure, that must be fun. And Elle Fanning seems like she must be a bit of a laugh, right? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know if that's ever been the first thing that sprung to mind, but I'm sure she is. I reckon all of the Fannings are a big laugh.
Yeah, and then you have like Michelle Pfeiffer in the sequel. Sure, if you're getting a mortgage paid and spending a day on set with Michelle Pfeiffer, sure, that's living the dream. What more would you want?
What more would you want? To be a sprite with in that environment. What a treat. But Maleficent certainly wasn't the first time I noticed Lesley. Was it yours? I don't think so either.
No, Lesley Manville would have been. I mean, we do this every episode, and I never prepare it. I think the first time I would have known who Lesley Manville was in anticipation of Another Year, and Another Year is one of the many collaborations she did with Mike Leigh, but probably the most celebrated for her personally and professionally, but for her in terms of the show, like the whole thing, this was like a Lesley Manville thing. You go and watch that and you're going to be awed by her character, and certainly people were. And yeah, I would have been interested, as I am still, obviously, in Oscars, and people would have been like, wow, she's going to, be nominated for Best Supporting Actress or Best Lead Actress. She's going to do really well. And that never really materialized. Like, she does get a BAFTA nomination and gets loads of critics' prizes, but for whatever reason, Another Year was like a hit in many ways, but it didn't properly open the doors wide open like she might have expected and what people might have expected of her. But I remember watching Another Year, and it has many of the things you would expect of a Mike Leigh film. So, it's heavy, there's a lot of characters who are struggling in various ways, and like we will focus more on it when we go through her career, but it is centered really around this performance from Lesley Manville, who through 4 seasons we see transform, or kind of not transform, just kind of keep go darker and darker and darker into depression, and her disconnect with her kind of stable family unit that she is interacting with, played by Ruth Sheen and Jim Broadbent. So amazing. And I remember when I had come to London, and I worked at the National Theatre, and as I started Grief, the Mike Leigh play with Lesley Manville was just closing, and I was so delighted to be part of an institution that had put this on, and I got to see it, and you'd be backstage, and there would be like Lesley Manville, like, to my mind, it's like one of the greatest actors. So for those reasons, I just have this real nostalgic kind of excitement for her, and also because she just keeps surprising every time that I've seen her since. And she'd be someone like when you hear like, oh, she's been cast in Paul Thomas Anderson, oh, she's cast in this Western, oh, she's cast as Mrs. Harris and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. It's like, whoa, I cannot wait to see what she does with that role, because I think it will be much more interesting than many of the other people that could have been cast in those roles. And what was your first time?
My first time was the same. It was Another Year. It was spoken about. I like that you said in anticipation of Another Year, because it was the same. It was that she was being written about so favourably everywhere. So when I went to the cinema, I was excited about the whole thing, but particularly excited to see what she was up to, and I was blown away, completely blown away by her performance in a film that we will talk about for sure. So even if she maybe wasn't familiar to me before then, as soon as I'd seen that, I would be seeking her out wherever I could.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be impossible not to after watching that film. And there's various, I think a lot of people have come to Lesley Manville in different ways over the last few years. Phantom Thread bringing an Oscar nomination for her, things like that. Mum on TV seems to have really have hit home with a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely wonderful show that I am obsessed with. Like, I rewatched the first episode for preparation of this, and I thought, yeah, like this touches upon a really wonderful character played Kathy by
Yeah.
Lesley Manville, and it just gets to utilize, that she is in many ways, a normal woman, but she also is sexy and she also has desires, but she also wants to like keep everyone around her happy, including some really unpleasant people like her sister-in-law.
Yes.
So there's all these things, and she's just so good in it. It's really delightful, and thankfully. And I think this comes, and this does come from her background in theatre and working with Mike Leigh from such a young age and being able to play all these different parts. A real belief that she can do anything, and she should. And she really seems to be pushing for these much more interesting roles, which is where we get something like Mum, let's say, on TV. And like so much TV she's done recently. Can't even think of what was the BBC like murder mystery show that she did that was this year.
Sherwood.
Exactly, and another very interesting choice, let's say, in a career of loads of interesting choices. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that she seems to have just kind of collected audiences as she's been going with all these sorts of different films that are aimed at different people and are telling different sorts of stories.
Yeah, for sure. Is as I guess we're going to focus on her films as we journey through the episode today, it is worth pointing out and underlining those two shows for her amazing work in them, and very, very different as she always does. What she's doing in Mum is very beautiful, touching, sweet. And then Sherwood is coming from a more, not complex, that would be unfair on Mum, but a very different place. Family dynamics, so struggling with a sister character, but in a very different way than the struggles we see in Mum. And there are really electrifying performances, especially that of her and her sister, played by Claire Rushbrook. There's a scene in particular where, after a lot of hurt and kind of unresolved things that they can't seem to deal with, they have this reconciliation moment with a wall between them, and the performance from both of them is unbelievably good. And that is just what we've come to expect of Lesley, is that she's operating on such a high level that she truly cannot be ignored when she's on screen, in whatever that is. So worth flagging, she does get to do really exciting stuff on TV and delivers in spades. So for watchers of particularly British television, she's definitely at the top of the game there.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess throwing in the crown there in a very different sort of way again. She really does seem to be one of the most interesting actors that can cross over to both film and TV. Let me then jump into an overview on Lesley, and we'll touch upon some of these films. She was born in Brighton in 1956. She was the daughter of a former ballet dancer, her mother, and her father was a taxi driver and a bookie. She trained as a soprano singer, and it sounds like she was pretty amazing. So she was doing this from the age of 8, and she was twice the under-18s champion of her county. So she was pursuing this, but it seems like from interviews or whatever that she wasn't really that interested in singing. So she wanted to act, and she gets, again, obviously must be naturally very gifted, because she gets quite a few TV roles, including a show called King Cinder, which is a gritty series aimed at children where two teenagers fight off a criminal gang running an extortion racket. It was very successful, from what I can gather. People would have enjoyed her. And at the age of 15, she gets a place at the Italia Conti Academy of Theatre Arts. And this opens a world of acting to her, leading her to a West End debut in a musical called I and Albert, directed by John Schlesinger, who people might know best from Midnight Cowboy, and he's making his West End debut, and I think musical theatre debut. And then that is followed on by a job in Emmerdale, as we currently know it. It was called Emmerdale Farm at the time, and she was there for 80 episodes between 1974 until
What?
1976.
How did I not know
Yeah,
that?
and
That's
she-
so many.
That is like, so she had a pretty
That'll have
big
been at least
part
a,
in the show.
a year potentially at that time on how many episodes were on, I reckon.
Yeah, I think from an interview with her, she was saying there's 2 episodes a week, maybe, or 3 some weeks.
Oh, okay,
And they
so
were on
maybe
during the
that.
day. Like, so it was very different to now, where I think Emmerdale's on like 5 times a week, and it's in the
Yeah.
evening, and it's as big as Coronation Street or EastEnders or whatever the other British soaps are at the moment. And but she didn't want to do that, even though she got she paid for her first flat with this money and all this sort of stuff. She says, I was quite savvy. I just thought, I don't want to be doing this all my life. My dad couldn't work out why. I was earning more money than he'd ever earned in his life, and I was on telly twice a week. I thought, well, there are few other things I want to do. And that kind of that summarizes Lesley in most ways. But yeah, she basically had this hunger that, Emmerdale Farm or whatever consistent job that she could get couldn't satisfy. So she goes into theatre. Like, she gets a very impressive career, working at the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Royal Court Theatre, which would have been a very exciting place at the time. And she did plays that, for anyone that's done like a brief overview of British theatre, these plays are so significant. So she's in Rita, Sue and Bob 2 in 1981, the Andrea Dunbar play. Top Girls in 1982 by Carol Churchill, who is a goddess of theatre. She's also in the original production of Dangerous Liaisons, which I'm not going to try and do the French title that they use in when it's on stage, by Christopher Hampton, that then is turned into the Glenn Close film. Usually successful plays, usually exciting people to work with. These are all at the top of their game. And so it's not surprising that she has this love for theatre based on this, and she just, continuously go back to it. And she does say, stage acting is where you learn your craft, where you learn to sink or swim. Nobody can bail you out. You cannot be edited around. You cannot be made to look any better or any worse than you are. It's raw. Raw? I can't say that. Raw? Raw sounds really plummy. Roar.
No.
R-A-W.
Raw.
That's what it's roar. So yeah, it's roar.
Oh my God. You sound like you're making roar.
Roar. Yeah, I don't know what it is about those letters together.
It's nice though. Roar.
But roar. It's roar. So yeah, she's fantastic. She clearly is getting so much out of this experience. At this time, she'd also meets Mike Leigh, and we'll go into that a bit more detail when we cover their first film together. But needless to say, it was a very significant meeting, and it really opened the door in terms of what she thought she would be capable of doing. So in 1985, film comes calling, and it is Dance with a Stranger, which is this Mike Newell directed film, a screenplay by Sheila Delaney, and it's starring Miranda Richardson as the last woman to ever be hung in the UK. And she's hung because she murders her lover, who's played by Rupert Everett, and he's basically being a bit of a dick. And it's a really interesting film for those who haven't seen it, about class, about gender. It has really great performances from Miranda Richardson and Rupert Everett, and it's really fun to see Lesley Manville. She is very, very, very small in this, but she basically has a really fun scene where she's bitching about Miranda Richardson in the toilet with another lady.
Sounds like a cockatoo with a cleft palate. I don't know if I've heard worse. I wish she'd give me the sack. I'd like to have a sense of grievance.
You were born with a sense of grievance.
But it is a theatre. Like, she doesn't make that many films at this point in her career. So she goes back, she's in The Cherry Orchard, directed by Sam Mendes in 1989 alongside Judi Dench. She also is consistently on TV in shows like Ain't Misbehaving and Holding On. But of course, there's something that does draw her back to films in the 90s, and it is Mike Leigh. She is the actress with the most appearances in Mike Leigh's filmography. So yes, as I was saying before, they met in 1979 when she was starting out and he was starting out, and he was looking for actors who could improvise, and that is actually something that she had done during her studies in the Italia Conti Academy. So they explored themes and I don't know if people know what Mike Leigh's method is of improvisation, but they basically, like, he works with the actors to really get to understand their characters by improvising different moments in their lives and the stories, and he's pulling out the story through these improvisation workshops. And then when it comes to filming, like, there is a script, and there are certain elements that might be kept a surprise for some actors and whatnot, but in general there is a script, and it's clear what the story will be by that point when they go to start filming. But these workshops, from what everyone says, just sound absolutely fantastic about discovering characters and building a whole sort of wealth of experience and knowledge of them. And it sounds like Lesley loved it. Like, she talks about, I met Mike and it was the most amazing light bulb moment. He told me I could act, and he told me I could play people that weren't like me, which was a revelation. You play some big parts in some things and little parts in others, but it's never short of thrilling because he's always going to get you to do something you've never done before. Which is terrific. Like, so it makes her first, like, cinema appearance in a Mike Leigh film in High Hopes in 1988, and then she pops up in Secrets and Lies in a really interesting part as she's social welfare officer opposite Marion Jean-Baptiste, and really interesting. And then Topsy Turvy, which I always think of her little moment in Topsy Turvy. So she plays the wife of Jim Broadbent's Gilbert, who's one half of Gilbert and Sullivan, and the film is really focused on Gilbert and Sullivan putting on a production. And Lesley really is kind of relegated to just a kind of a wife role. But of course, as a Mike Leigh film, it's expanded and it's much more interesting. And there's this wonderful sequence where Jim Broadbent comes back from a show and he was talking about the applause.
Wouldn't it be wondrous if perfectly commonplace people gave each other a round of applause at the end of the day? Well done, Kitty. Well done.
Well done, Kitty. Bravo. Encore.
Thank you, Willie.
She's just so much light coming out of this character and performance, and which I think she does very well very often, of having something tangibly sort of hopeful from the way that she's performing on screen. So I absolutely love her performance in Topsy Turvy. Then there's also Vera Drake and Mr. Turner. But the two big ones are All or Nothing and Another Year. So All or Nothing is released in 2002, and it's the first time in film that we get Lesley in a proper leading role. Like, it is an ensemble, like, so she's not the over the title like Miss Harris Goes to Paris, but she is, you know, as prominent as any of the other characters in it.
Yes, it's wonderful that this film gives her the opportunity to have that real meaty leading role, which we had been missing until this point. But All or Nothing, it can be quite hard often to describe Mike Leigh films as like a narrative, but it follows a family of which she is the mother, and we have Timothy Spall as the dad. James Corden is their son, and then, now I must remember the daughter's name because I thought she was fabulous.
Alison Garland, yeah.
And Alison Garland as the daughter. And we see them at a point where they are certainly struggling with the day-to-day.
You had enough? Had enough of what? Had enough of working for 5 minutes, so you switched it off?
What can I switch off when I've had enough? Had enough of getting up every morning, going to work, doing the shopping, coming home, cooking the tea, cleaning the house, doing the ironing, making sure everyone's got clean clothes on their back. What can I switch off when I've had enough?
And you can tell certainly Lesley Manville's character is at a point where she's feeling very cut off from her husband, certainly. She feels quite lonely. I think she feels very unsatisfied in her marriage and her life in general. She's a supermarket worker. But we see her in her interactions with her friends. Ruth Sheen plays her best pal in this. Marion Bailey, sort of her other best pal, but struggling a lot with the bottle. Marion Bailey is fantastic in this film.
Marion Bailey we have to do a podcast on, basically, was my main take. I mean, she's amazing in this, and I love her, Mr. Turner. Anyway, go on.
No, she is amazing. Drunk performances are hard to get right, and often it's quite cringe to watch people try it. She plays it incredibly well, and it's also very, very heartbreaking to watch. But anyway, yes, we will do Marion Bailey another time, I'm sure. But yes, so as many Mike Leigh films are, it is about kind of hardship of the working classes, really, and that's sort of what is at the heart of this one. And therefore can feel a little bleak, and I think as I'm describing it probably sounds quite impenetrable. It's not. There is a lot to it which does kind of make it buoyant in between. I think Ruth Sheen being the real key to that. I think Ruth Sheen's character in this is luminous and someone you would want to have in your life, especially if things feel a little more on the hopeless side, as you certainly are getting for Lesley Manville in this. But as it kind of develops, things happen to her family, which puts her in an even more desperate situation, but ultimately something that can bring them back together, almost a sort of reset for the family. So I think there is a lot of hope in there too, but definitely one of the more blanket, bleak offerings that Mike Leigh has done. Would you say that's fair? Or are you like, no, there's far more bleak than this? I'm sure there are, actually.
Well, I think the thing about Mike Leigh, like, there are very bleak and really like Peterloo is something I will never recover from, and I think that's the point of watching a massacre for 20 minutes or something that's filmed in a very Mike Leigh sort of style, seeing like a child trampled on by a horse, for instance. So I think compared to that, All or Nothing is less.
Sure.
I don't know,
it's not that
difficult
bad.
or less like hard to watch. But having said all that, I think the thing about Mike Leigh, and this comes at a really interesting point in his career, I think there's a real delicate balance usually where it's not like misery porn. It is an insightful, empathetic examination of characters in a certain sort of environment. If you think about Vera Drake or Another Year, as we'll get into, I think All or Nothing falls into misery porn because all we're getting really is a lot of, looking down on people. I don't think we empathize as much as we do in most of this other work. So I found it actually unpleasant to watch, but mainly because I was like, what is the point here? Because in other films it really makes sense. I think watching, say, James Corden treat his family with such disrespect and treat his body with such disrespect and treat, all this is not very, like, what is the point of that? And there's Timothy Spall is a very passive sort of character in it, and he keeps like promising of like he might do things like he's going to wake up early. And then when you have Lesley come back saying, I'm sick of this. Like, she's tired in her response, saying, like, what difference would that make? You could have done that all your time. I get up early. We get up early. We do all this work. You do nothing. And I'm just like, why? Like, what is the story? And if it's not just to be, like, look down on people and maybe be like, God, woo, like, there's some pretty sad things happening in, Britain today, I don't know what the point is. So, yeah, I would say it's bleak, and I would say it's one of his least accomplished films, and that's of somebody who's made incredible work. I'd never recommend this film to anybody.
Okay. I would recommend this film to people, but I completely hear what you're saying. I think it is far less accomplished in many ways, but because some of his other films are so excellent, I think it would be hard to be hitting that in every case. I think it's, as part of his filmography, it stands out as a lesser entry. Had this been made, by example, by a debut filmmaker or a young filmmaker, I think, potentially it would be looked at very, very differently. I think it does certainly verge into miserable for not much more than the sake of miserable at times, yes. But I think what I recognise in a lot of this film, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm from a background that is like these characters, I'm not, but there is real joy in the familiar. I mentioned Ruth Sheen, we mentioned Marion Bailey, but there is a way that the characters this interact, and even in more, gloomy moments or lonely moments, there's something so unbelievably real and recognisable, I think that's the important thing, familiar about these characters, that it does inject it for me with real insight and light and understanding of what real people look like on screen. Something that many, many filmmakers struggle with, something that Mike Leigh never does seem to struggle with. But here, I really do believe these characters. And maybe that's where we get into the discussion of to what extent should cinema be escapist. Maybe I also just have a particular appetite for miserablest kitchen sink British fare. I certainly am drawn to a lot of films like this, and I think that is a personal taste thing. But there are flashes of real brilliance in this. Alison Garland as the sister, I'm not familiar with her as an actress, I don't think. But, oh my goodness, she broke my heart in a way that I haven't had in a while. She just completely gets this character and fills her with love. This person was very familiar to me. I wouldn't want to say who they remind me of, but that her character was very familiar to me. And in a very heartwarming way as well. Not just for the sake of sadness, but it's a really interesting performance in amongst a lot of really great performances. So I would recommend it, but with the caveat that if you are not into miserablest British fare, then it probably is not going to be for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say that for all of Mike Leigh's films, apart from, say, maybe Secrets and Lies and Topsy-Turvy, perhaps. Because I think, well, Vera Drake, Another Year, Peterloo, even Mr. Turner, I think there's the tone of his films, but yeah. And yeah, always his performances will be terrific. So it has a lot of all the things. If you enjoy Mike Leigh and you're diehard fan, you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't, check this out. Otherwise, yeah. Start with something else, maybe easier.
I would say definitely start with something else if you're new to Mike Leigh, 100%.
Yeah. And then, so Another Year is, the film which really elevates Lesley Manville in filmmaking circles. And that comes out in 2010. So much excitement really around, well, this film, but also around her performance. It goes to Cannes, celebrated there, really well received. And it stars, really, the real leads, I guess, is Jim Broadbent and Roisin. They play Tom and Jerry, who are this, middle-class couple who have a friend, which is the other lead, Lesley Manville, and who's Mary. And the film follows seasons, so we see them in spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And it follows, they're different sorts of styles of, well, it's really just an aesthetic choice of how it looks for each of those seasons, but it's also the character's behaviour. So we meet Mary, and she works with Roisin in a, well, I want to say a hospital, but specifically Roisin is a therapist. That's why I don't actually know if that's the correct word that you use for what she's doing, but she starts off and she's talking to Imelda Staunton, or her colleague's talking to Imelda Staunton.
Yeah, I would say she is like a counsellor, yeah.
A counsellor, that's probably the more appropriate word there. Counsellor. But anyway, they work together, they go for a drink. We see Lesley, who, as we're talking about people playing drunks well, this is a pretty good representation too, because she, as you like to say, which I've I've not heard in years, she likes the bottle. It's a euphemism I've so rarely hear nowadays. But she likes the bottle. She also likes men. She likes she likes attention. She likes to feel special. She's a very vulnerable woman. We know this from the off, when the way she's like twirling her hair and trying to get the attention of this younger man, or get the attention of this man, who then turns his attention to a younger woman that he's with. And there's a real sense of loneliness and isolation, because, you know, Roisin has her partner in her life because they also have a son, and Lesley has nothing in kind of in terms of what she wants out of life, or what she's considering important. It is a wonderful performance, really layered. Like, compared to All or Nothing, say, the film as a whole, even though we're watching very heavy things and characters going through some really upsetting moments, it never really feels like we are being, you know, we're just spectators and someone else like having a sad life. We're watching it and we're getting something out of it, and we're part of that journey with that character. And I think that's an incredibly exciting thing that Mike Leigh mostly does very well, and is key to why I think Lesley Manville connected with audiences so much in this film.
No, but I'm really comfortable with where I am in my life. As you know, I've got my lovely little garden flat, I've got a good job, I've got my health, touch wood, I've got my independence, I haven't got anybody telling me what to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not all rosy. I have good days and bad days like everyone else, don't I?
And through the story, she gets more and more isolated, really, and her depression really takes hold, is how I would read what was going on. And that, like, the final winter sequence is so hard to watch but also, like, I don't know, you're just like, oh, this is hard, but will she be okay? I don't know, there's something, it's not even that it's hopeful, I just think it's engaging and thoughtful and interesting in a way, say, All or Nothing didn't achieve, but what is achieved in Another Year is just so fascinating to me. So yeah, I really love Another Year. I think she's terrific in it. It obviously should have been Oscar nominated. And the film as a whole should have been more celebrated than it was, perhaps. But I do also appreciate it's probably trickier than, say, Vera Drake, in that it didn't, you know, it's just like a film following these kind of middle-class people through their, you know, a year in their life. Like, what? It's just, like the title says, it's just another year. Like, it really could just say just another year.
Yeah. It's everything you describe. I think her performance is an all-time great performance. I really, really do. And I think it sort of links into what I was saying about All or Nothing. I think Mike Leigh's certainly very generous in the characters that he brings into his films. And I really don't mean that to sound condescending, patronising. I hope it's not at all, to characters like this. But it's so often that these people, very sadly, if you encountered them in real life, you would have to be a very kind-hearted person, like, exceptionally so, like Ruth Sheen's character in this film, and like All or Nothing, I should say, too, to have the time that they deserve if you were to sit down and get to know them and understand everything that Michael's described as going on in their life, and know where they're coming from. I'm sure it would be an incredibly rewarding thing to do, but we probably far too often would roll our eyes or pay no heed to people who kind of have this outward way of being that is perhaps concealing other things. And I think she's just nailing every nuance and beat of this character. It's an absolute masterclass, and there's no wonder it was the reason that you and I both became big fans of Lesley Manville. But yeah, I think the film as a whole is great. I really am certainly a champion of Mike Leigh films, even though there's still blind spots that I will look forward to filling as well, as soon as I can. But this, for me, there's so many great performances, so it would probably be a dangerous road to go down to start saying who's like top tier, but this is certainly a top tier Mike Leigh performance, amongst other greats.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's, when people ask, what is your favorite film of all time, or any of these, like, I feel like this fits into that because there's just so many, and the ones that like come to my mind are just, you know, Melda Staunton, in Vera Drake, Marion Jean Baptiste, and Brendan Blesson in Secrets and Lies. There's just so many wonderful performances. I know this isn't a film strictly, but Alison Steadman in Abigail's Party as Beverly. You know, it's just a real treat. She's just a real treat, and I think that's even if Mike Leigh wants to do bog standard sort of movies, which of course he has never really been in the business of doing, you'd still be like, well, the film or the performances will be amazing. But yeah, to summarise it, we love Mike Leigh, and we love Lesley in Mike Leigh films, and so do other people. Like for another year, she does receive the National Board of Review Award for Best Actress. She gets the BAFTA nomination for Best Supporting Actress, and so many other critics prizes. But it is, again, like theatre where she focuses most of her time in the early noughties. She's in His Dark Materials at the National Theatre, playing Mrs. Coulthard, is that what we call it? The Nicole Kidman part in the movie. She's in All About My Mother at the Old Vic, a stage adaptation of that. 6 Degrees of Separation with Anthony Head at the Old Vic as well. And then with Ghosts in 2014, is really celebrated for that production, winning the Olivier Award for Best Actress. And then it's after this, or at this sort of time, like in 2015 or so, she starts becoming a more regular face in film. So we have her in Maleficent as one of the fairies alongside Imelda Staunton and Juno Temple. So you see them often in this sort of digitized version of themselves, like tiny little like squashed faces, and then sometimes you see them as their human forms, and they look after Elle Fanning or Aurora. Oh my god, I now I'm calling it the drag queen's name, Aurora, and trying to protect her from Maleficent, played by Angelina Jolie. She also is in Molly Moon and the Incredible Book of Hypnotism in 2015, and Hampstead in 2017 with Diane Keating and Brendan Gleeson, where she is playing kind of a prototype villain, but it's, you know, this story, Hampstead, is really about Diane Keating and Brendan Gleeson connecting. During all of this, TV is also becoming more prolific, and also she's getting, you know, these interesting parts in them. So we have her in River, we have her in Mum, as we were talking about, and we also have her in Harlots with Samantha Morton and a terrific cast of people. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a fun show, and really interesting to see her play this sort of villainous person in the past. And then, of course, we have Phantom Thread. So Phantom Thread really is a film that has opened loads of doors for her. I'm assuming, like myself, this is a film you would have seen when it came out.
Yes, absolutely. Phantom Thread is one of the most delectable films I've ever had the treat of seeing at the cinema. It is incredible.
So it's directed and written by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as a fashion designer who is the House of Woodstock, right? Or
Woodcock.
Woodcock. I can't remember. We just did a podcast thing on Emma, who's called Woodhouse, and I was going. Anyway, Woodcock, and his sister is Lesley. And at the start, it is, we meet them all in the house, and there's this woman that clearly Daniel Day-Lewis is having a dalliance with, and he is bored with now. He wants her to leave. And it is Lesley Manville's character who is running this household. It is the way that she's positioned. She's like watching everything. She is, she's like making notes mentally, but also physically. She is in control, and she's the one that gets rid of this woman. She's the one that is making sure things are happening. So like Daniel Day-Lewis is tired after a successful day of selling dresses, and he goes, maybe you should go to the countryside now. Now the way that is worded is like, you go to you have to go here, like this will be better for you, trust me. But she's wording it to make him feel like he's in control. And then, of course, he meets Vicky Creeps, who then becomes part of the household too. And she brings this energy, which really confronts mostly Daniel Day-Lewis, but also toward, as the story goes, Lesley Manville too, and it's really fascinating to watch. And I mean, even the style, the way they speak to each other, Daniel Day-Lewis and Lesley Manville, it's this heightened sort of world, and it's wonderfully dynamic, their interactions.
No, don't turn it on me. I don't want your cloud on my head.
Shut up,
Oh, no,
Sue.
you can shut right up. Don't pick a fight with me. You certainly won't come out alive. I'll go right through you, and it'll be you who ends up on the floor. Understood?
I think as like a comeback goes, that might be one of the best in cinema history ever.
Yes.
I don't want to hear you. You're hurting my ears. You're making like there's so many amazing lines. So she's just hypnotic to watch in the film. That's full of amazing moments. But it's, for me, when I first saw it, and even and rewatching it here, I'm like, you're the key to why this film works, because you're an old trope of like a sister or spinster woman that's older, that's controlling everything. But she also doesn't give a fuck. I think she just wants to enjoy her life and like have none of this drama around her, but also does care for Vicky Creeps' character as well. Like, she's just so good. It's just so good. I love it.
Yeah, it is wonderful, and absolute respect to Paul Thomas Anderson for writing such wonderful lines, because I agree, some of these cut downs go down as the best in history. And I can only imagine he was drawing inspiration or had a real hankering for being able to write something that would have been heard and seen in like 1940s, 50s cinema with like Bette Davis saying it. That's what I can imagine. Some of these lines feel sculpted as if they would have slotted into All About Eve or something like that. It is so good. The dynamic that her character has with Vicky Creeps' character in particular, I find fascinating as well, because she's become used to controlling the relationships and being the one to put a stop to things. And at one point she does suggest, it's time now, shall we get rid of her? But Vicky Creeps' character is going to be staying on the scene. And Alma does grow to really respect her. And then it flips the whole dynamic on its head. And that's where she ends up kind of tearing down Daniel Day-Lewis's character. But there's moments when she is first kind of circling Alma as she enters the scene, and she smells her, and kind of then details what her perfume is, what her scent is specifically, and Alma's very, very impressed, and then she smells her again and describes what she's just eaten, and it's so imposing, it's threatening, it's almost primitive. I just think everything that's been allowed for Lesley Manville to do with this character is amazing, and it just brings so much to an already terrific film. I mean, Phantom Thread for me is an all-time great because it is holding up toxic masculinity and I guess wrestling with it. I'm sure Paul Thomas Anderson has his own kind of battles with how he created this character and what he's trying to present. And at moments, you wonder if he is a kind of admiring of Reynolds Woodcock, and I think he probably is, but he also details him with such repugnant qualities that you know he is also trying to elevate the women and their stance on this man and how he fits into their life, and kind of this power play and this movement of control between the characters. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It's swoon-worthy. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. Everything about this film, for me, is absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend this film enough. I think it gets richer on each rewatch. There's something new to discover, and everyone is at the top of their game.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about toxic masculinity, like the women behave in toxic ways too. Like, everyone is pretty toxic in this, and I don't think, you know, that it makes it unpleasant to watch. I mean, some people might find it unpleasant. It's almost a fairy tale, the film. So for me, it's more detached from reality, because if I ever heard, you know, a friend of mine was in that sort of relationship, I'd be like, get the hell out. Whether you were Vicky Creeps or Daniel Day-Lewis, or you're even the sister living in the same house, I'd be like, get the hell out of there. But it's a fairy tale, and yeah, Johnny Greenwood's score and music and all, just like everything about it makes it that way. So it is wonderful. And And just to go back to what you're saying about Paul Thomas Anderson and Lesley Manville, in an interview about Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson talks about Lesley Manville and what she brought. And there's a moment very early on in the film where Lesley is basically looking down the barrel of the lens. And that is not something that he had given her. He had described what he wanted of the character, and in that moment, and Lesley presented that. And when he saw that, he was like, whoa, that's unlocked something about the film. But also, like, now I'm going to, like, understand Lesley can kind of run with this in a really exciting way. So it's clear, maybe that's the theatre background and Mike Leigh and all this sort of stuff, but she understood what she was doing and elevated that film. Terrific and absolutely deserving of her Oscar nomination. And when she talks about it, like, she talks about this wonderful experience, and she talks about the Oscar nomination be like the cherry on the cake, because she was offered a lot, she talks about. So one of the first things she goes on to do is Ordinary Love. So, a leading role shared with Liam Neeson about a couple who've been together for a very long time, and, very sort of ordinary, to take the title out, ordinary couple just going through their life, and she discovers she has cancer. And it's about them, in a very non-dramatic way, connecting and supporting each other and getting through this process. And when I say getting through it, I just mean day by day, not in a large-scale sort of beating cancer and this is what you can do. It's not Calendar Girls, or it's not any of these sorts of maybe British drama comedies you might expect, or anything like that. This is a proper, just mature drama following a couple, and it's really terrific. And I think both Liam Neeson and Lesley Manville are terrific. And again, she could easily have been nominated for awards for that role. So yeah, she's great. And then there's also Misbehavior, where she plays Bob's Hope wife alongside Greg Kinnear in awful makeup. Really an interesting film, maybe not the most successful in terms of, like, it's about 1960s Miss World competition, where we have a group of protesters led by Keira Knightley and Jessie Buckley trying to take down this competition where Bob Hope is kind of representing all the kind of toxic stuff. But then you also have loads of interesting conversations about race and colonialism and feminism, but it's just, for whatever reason, it just falls a bit flat. But it's a grand movie. Like, I wouldn't be saying it's bad.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to like in there, but yeah, I agree.
And she's really good. I think Lesley Manville's really deceptively good, because she's kind of there, present, and doesn't have to have any opinion or anything, but she clearly does, and she does have an interesting role to play. Then we get into a film we've talked about lots in this podcast, but Let Him Go, which is directed by Thomas Bezuka. It is a Western where Diane Lane and Kevin Costner have their son has died, and their daughter-in-law and their grandchild have been taken away by Lesley Manville and her group of sons. And it's clear that Lesley Manville is scary and is in charge of a lot of I don't know, like, sinister
bad
sort of
things.
plans. I mean, it's never quite clear. Like, she's just a bad woman. And it is delicious. I didn't obviously watch the film, rewatch it for this, but she is so vividly in my head. The way she is controlling her boys, as she calls them, the way she, the dynamic between her and Diane Lane and Kevin Costner, but she is in control. It is amazing to watch her have so much power in these scenes, doing this American accent with this amazing blonde wig. If we're talking about, like, Bette Davis sorts of roles, Bette Davis would have killed for this role.
Oh, breathe easy. Anyone who knows me knows I can't be insulted. Eat my chops or don't.
Well, we'd certainly hoped to meet Donnie's family someday.
Oh, had you? Well, I'm glad to learn that. Yeah, I thought we should meet too. Have ourselves a chat.
It is wild to me that this film didn't get her any awards attention, because she's terrific in it. I mean, the film as a whole I love, but Lesley Manville's really, really great. Which brings us to this year and her most recent film, where she is, for the first time ever, above the title, it's her name, it's her role, it's her show. It's Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which... Do you want to describe, like, how excited have we been for Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris?
Oh, very excited. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen you in particular as excited for a film for such a prolonged period of time. The amount of times, it was almost like a countdown. How many months to Mrs. Harris? So when it finally came out, yes, absolutely, what a delight. So, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris follows Mrs. Harris, played by Lesley Manville, as we see her cleaning houses, which is her job, and then we learn very early on that she's been holding out hope that her husband, who has been I guess AWOL at war, hasn't returned, and then when she kind of gets the conclusive news...
That's really important, the war bit. I thought you were just going to say, the husband's gone AWOL. Well...
No.
That's a Mike Leigh film.
Action. Missing in action, I guess, is the better way of putting it. And holding out hope, and then when she gets the news that he sadly will not be returning to her, very, very sad, but it does open up this sort of change of spirit in her, where she realises she wants to go out and get things for herself. And very interestingly, this stems from the discovery of a Christian Dior dress in the wardrobe of one of her clients. And she then very much covets this dress. She wants it very, very much, or a Dior of her own, and makes it her mission to save, and get herself to Paris, get herself to the House of Dior, and get herself a dress. And that's kind of the basic premise, but then we spend a lot of time with her in Paris and the encounter she has with the likes of Isabelle Huppert, who is the... What would you call her? Her job role.
She's like the managing director almost of Dior, yeah.
Yeah, and very, very
She's the bad
noticed
bitch
the
in
idea.
charge.
Yeah, and she doesn't want Mrs. Harris being someone who gets her hands on a Dior dress. What does that mean for the image of Dior? And that's very much the trajectory that the rest of the film takes. Is I guess the shift from haute couture fashion towards high street fashion, essentially. That's sort of the idea at the heart of it, and where that shift might have come from. And by Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris standards, it's Mrs. Harris who made that change. She's the one who shifted high fashion and moved them towards a more accessible option. I mean, Dior is still hardly accessible. But also the encounter she has with other workers in the House of Dior. And it's just very, very touching and sweet. It's a really lovely film. I can't imagine people wouldn't just think it's the loveliest thing. Even if those ideas, when you say them out loud, they sound very hokey, but it just works. It just works very, very well. And Lesley as Mrs. Harris is a real delight. She brings such soul to this woman. You love her from beginning to end. It's a lovely thing. But you know a little bit more about the history of Mrs. Harris than I do, and you've perhaps encountered it more. I didn't know about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris at all until this film was on the horizon, basically.
Well, yeah, I remember my grandparents' house, there'd be TV on during the day or whatever, during the summer it must have been, and the Angela Lansbury TV movie version was on the screen, and I remember that very well, yeah. I remembered the last shot so, vividly of that, and then have read the book by Paul Gallico. I hope that's correct. If not, they're dead, so I don't think they'll come at me. But I like it a lot, and what I'll say about the TV adaptation and the book is that they needed updating to be relevant to today, and this version is very faithful in many ways, but it makes such clever decisions, and I think that starts with the casting of Lesley Manville, because Lesley is well able to have this sort of joy kind of coming out of her and radiating out of her and be almost like a Paddington-esque sort of character Or even like Amy Adams in Enchanted, there's like something about her where she meets people and by her presence makes them feel better. You know, she has this reassuring presence. But what Lesley also does really well is this very sort of base level strength. Like, so she might seem vulnerable on the surface, but you will not also mess with her. Like, she's very well able to look after herself, which is like at the start, even though she's waiting for her husband, she is in, there's no doubt that she's looking after herself. She's been looking after herself for a long, long time. And herself and her friend played in a really lovely performance by Ellen Thompson. They just have this really lovely dynamic. They go for a drink, they meet on the bus, they save each other seats, all this sort of thing. Yeah, I just think it's so good. So then from that point on, like the script has just been adapted so well. So for instance, a moment which really to me elevates the whole film is that there's a character played by Anna Chancellor who refuses to pay really Lesley Manville. She's always like, no, I don't have the money, I'll get the money sometime. And there's a point in the film where Lesley says to her,
Will you please accept my notice, Lady Dan? I will require full and final settlement of your account by the end of the week.
You can't leave me.
Them days are over when you can treat people like scum and expect loyalty in return.
I'm just like, whoa, like, this in another movie, another adaptation, like, it wouldn't have sat very well in the Angela Lansbury film. Whereas what the real achievement here is that they've made this fantasy film that also has grit to it and has a real heart that isn't just soft. Like, it's like, you know, and it's not like the stiff upper lip shit either. I think it's more open than that in terms of interpretation. It's not that she is a victim ever. She's just standing up for herself. And I don't know. I just think it's really fascinating to watch a character be both fairy tale-esque, but also live in a semi-real world and go through ups and downs while also making other people's lives joyful. Yeah, I just think it's wonderful. And I think there's so many wonderful moments in it. You know, when she's chosen a dress and she doesn't get the first dress she wanted, but she gets a second dress. And she goes in for a fitting.
Don't get all this hoo-ha when you buy a frock down Woolworths.
Well, I can tell you such things do not happen every day here either.
Ah, the lady who must have a dress, vite, vite, vite. Votre manteau, s'il vous plaît.
Your coat, please.
Oh.
Et le cardigan.
Yep, me cardi. Thank you very much.
And you can tell from all the staff there that they're loving it all too. And you just know that the film is going to be lovely and charming, and you will feel a bit better about the world, and you might interact with people a bit better after watching it too. I don't know, it's a film about kindness essentially, I think, and respect.
Yes.
And I just love that. Absolutely love it. And yet Lesley is the perfect person to do this role. Like, I'm sure, you know, when they were talking about casting, you could have done, all sorts of people could have been on that list.
Yeah.
But I think she is the only person I would have wanted to have seen in it. And just a shout out, because I think the music is by a person called Rael Jones, and it is so lovely. Like, it's so perfectly done. And I think we're so used to, say, Alexander Desplat would have been the person I think they would,
sure,
you know, in a dream would. But it's like, I work with other people. Like, we have to stop getting the same composers and all these. Like, it drives me nuts, you know. So I'm just highlighting that because I hope that we get to see more of their work in other films, Rael Jones. But yeah, it's a wonderful film. Absolutely love it. Also, Lucas Bravo is a gorgeous man. You also have Alba Baptista in, like, being gorgeous, and they have this romance that Mrs. Harris is championing. I just love it. I just absolutely love it. So yeah, I've already seen it twice, and I can't wait to watch it again, hopefully over Christmas.
Yeah, it's a perfect... I was going to say, this is a perfect Christmas film. This would be a great film for families to sit down and watch, because it has both that very family-friendly value, but it has that magical sparkle, that fairy tale-esque element to it. So I think it really would suit that viewing perfectly. Do you think we'll see any awards potential for Lesley in this? Do we think there is potential?
Yeah. Well, I imagine, the Golden Globes would have her as Best Supporting Best Actress in a Comedy Musical. But other than that, no. I can't imagine even BAFTA would go for it in a year where we have so many terrific, you know, actors to consider for Best Actress. I don't think so. It just seems wild that she could make the top 5. And even with BAFTA, you know, sometimes celebrating British people over others, I just don't think that will make the cut. Perhaps the film, I think, could be for Best British Film, but I don't think outside of that it probably has much of a chance.
Interesting. I think it will be nominated at BAFTA. She will be. And I think that if it had been someone else in the lead role, potentially, like imagine it was like a Meryl Streep in a film like this. I'm so glad it wasn't, but I mean, we've seen her get nominated for lesser films for sure.
Yeah.
So,
but don't forget, BAFTA have the jury voting, so that's why I don't think she'll be nominated for the BAFTAs.
Oh, of course,
I don't imagine
that is such a good point.
Because she'd have to. So basically, for those who do not know, I think you have to be in the top 2 or 1, maybe it's turned into now, and then otherwise a jury vote for the remainder nominees. And, you know, rightly so. I don't know if, you know, even if I was on a jury and there was a lot of performances, I would be championing Lesley for this particular category. Also knowing Lesley will be back again. You know, like, there's no doubt in my mind that she'll have other opportunities. But I think it's wonderful, I guess, when we reflect on her career that she is playing, you know, she's playing awful people in loads of her films, but now she's, you know, also playing, you know, Princess Margaret in The Crown, and then she's also Mrs. Harris. And I just think she's opening so many doors with the choices she's making. So I think she's a really, really exciting person to keep an eye on. And it's wild. She's only has one film listed coming up called The Critic. And otherwise, I'm like, what's wrong with everybody? You know, Paul Thomas Anderson did just announce a new film that he's filming next year. So perhaps Lesley will be in that. I don't know. But I do have high hopes, and that's why I wouldn't worry too much about awards. And I think, you know, a film like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, I'm all for championing it, but I'm not sure awards is the way, because the way awards culture, particularly for film, is people seem to hate what is celebrated, particularly if they are kind-hearted, sort of, you know, aiming at, you know, great entertainment, high-quality film, but they're not, you know, Power of the Dog or something that people like, we should, or Tar. Do you know, like, I hate the idea that like Kate Blanchett isn't nominated and Lesley is, and people just start hating on Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Which seems like the opposite effect of what a film like that is trying to say. So, how have you felt digging into Lesley's career and looking at her films in a in such an intense sort of viewing?
I very, very much enjoyed it. It has, like you said at the beginning, made me realise that I thought there was much more in the filmography than there was. Obviously, there is a lot of TV stuff as well, and she's doing very, very well either way. I perhaps was just expecting more. But she is just wonderful, and her work in many ways is the top tier of screen acting, and I'm sure she is the same if you're lucky enough to see her on stage. What do you think her best performance is?
Ooh.
Or your favourite?
Well, my favourite film by a lot, I'd say, is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, but I think her best role, the one that's jumping out at me, is Ordinary Love, because I think all the other roles are like focused on like extremes in a way, and Ordinary Love allows her to be a very ordinary sort of person and play all these different shades, and so that might be the one. Like, I mean, she's terrific in so many things, but that's what makes it wonderful too. Like, I you know, so many are jumping out at me, so I wouldn't have one, but I find her so exciting on screen all of the time, and I guess Ordinary Love is interesting because it's not showy, but it's still like an expertly performed character. So that excites me even more, that she can just do anything. A stylized Mike Leigh, you know, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, Let Him Go, as she's being this American, like, cowboy boss. and then Ordinary Love, where she's just playing the most ordinary of people living in Northern Ireland. You know. What about you?
I think Another Year for me is undeniable, but I think Ordinary Love's a really great answer, and a film that should be championed more. But maybe I do like the slightly more extreme, and she's doing a lot in Another Year, that's for sure. But perfectly. So that probably would be my vote, but it's hard.
Yeah, that's a hard choice. Amazing. But as it's my birthday, my answer is more important.
Exactly. Your answer is the most important.
And my
So
birthday
the
wish is
correct
everybody
answer
to
is-
watch Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Honestly, spend your Christmas and have a little joy. Because I want to be Mrs. Harris in real life.
And you can.
Anyway, speaking of birthdays, I believe you are going to test me, because that's what we do on a birthday, apparently, is test each other.
Yeah, what says birthday more than a little quiz? So, yes, you are going to be quizzed this week. What would your prize of choice be? Perhaps it is, as you've just suggested, your birthday wish.
Yeah, I think before we started you said I had a birthday present, but but now I because only people can hear my recording, it just sounds like I'm asking for a present. But my birthday wish is that everyone be kinder to each other and be a little bit more like Mrs. Harris, yeah.
You have got a birthday present. It's just not here yet. And you will
I
get
see.
to enjoy it and share it on your actual birthday, which, as we discussed at the beginning, is quite close.
Okay, sorry. Apologies for bringing up that awkward thing. Okay, great. I just want people to be kind then. That's all I want for my birthday.
But you'll get your present either way, so there's that.
Amazing.
Or maybe you won't. Maybe I'll
Do you want a
burn it when it arrives.
Oh my god.
Okay, so since it's your special day, this game is in the style of Bruce Forsyth, higher or lower. Are these actresses younger or older than you? Number 1, Glenn Close.
Clearly, Glenn is older than me.
That is incorrect. Glenn is significantly younger than you. And that is the end of that round. You didn't perform as well as we'd hope.
Yeah.
But the real quiz this week is one of the older ones that I used to do that I haven't actually in a while. So
Older,
returning
stop
to
mentioning
it,
name. Stop saying about being older, young.
God, sorry, it's just on my mind all the time. This one is on Oscar nominees or winners that Lesley will have worked with. So Lesley herself is an
Okay.
Oscar nominee, rightly so. Yay. What I'm going to do is I'll tell you the name of a film and how many Oscar nominees she's worked alongside. I just need their names. And if you're feeling really confident, you could even say what they're nominated for. I'll let you kind of dive in and give that
Okay.
a go too.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Let's do it. That's
Okey-doke.
exciting.
Right. The first one. This is just one Oscar nominee, and it is Ordinary Love.
Liam Neeson for Schindler's List. Should have been
Neeson
nominated for
indeed.
Michael Collins as well.
Is that for real or a joke?
No, I'm saying he's terrific in Michael Collins.
Oh, okay. I just thought it might have been some kind of Irish inside joke there. I was like, oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, for the
Then
niche listeners who are Irish and know film, this is a joke about Michael Collins. Michael Collins is not someone Irish people joke about, Scott, so be careful.
Okay, my apologies. We will move swiftly on to the next one, which is Let Him Go.
So we have Diane Lane for the sexy thriller Unfaithful. I actually nearly forgot the name. I was like, what was it called? Unfaithful, with Olivier Martinez as her lover. And, well, Kevin Costner, he wasn't nominated for... it's acting nominees we're talking...
It is acting nominees, yeah.
So, was he nominated for Dances with Wolves? I don't think he was. Maybe he was. Everyone loved that movie at the time.
He was.
Okay, for terrific, yeah. But is that the only Oscar nomination Kevin has?
That's the only acting nomination he has, because of course he
Acting,
also
sorry, yes,
won...
because he won for director, yeah, for Dances with the Wolves.
Yes.
And producing probably
Yes,
too. Did he?
indeedy.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, he got it all. The works. What a time for him.
He got the works.
Okay, 2 nominees in this one as well. This is Dance with a Stranger.
So Miranda Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
And that's... What is that Joan Plow... Enchanted April? Is that her nomination?
That's not.
Oh, shame. Well, not shame because she didn't deserve it. 2.
She has 2 acting nominations.
Oh, Miranda, good for you. I couldn't tell you. Not Crying Game. Was she nominated for? I don't know. I don't know what her nominations are for. I feel like one is like 2 first names, and I can't tell, like Molly and Mike or something. But I don't know what it is.
So that you're referring to Tom and Viv, her other,
exactly,
which she was nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role. She was also nominated for Supporting for Damage.
Yeah. Sorry, what film we talking? Oh, and then there's someone else. Sorry, is there another person in Dance with a Stranger?
Mm-hmm.
God, and I just watched that film, and I can't think of who else is in it. Because Rupert Everett sadly wasn't nominated, as he should have been, for My Best Friend's Wedding. It must be another man in it, but I can't think of who is in that cast. It's going to be someone like Stephen Ray or someone, and I'm going to feel so stupid because it will be so clear that they were in the film. I don't know.
It's Bilbo Baggins himself, if that helps.
Oh, of course it is, because he plays the really lovely guy, and now I can't think of his name, and you've just told me anyway, so I've lost that. I can't think of that lovely... Is he a lovely actor? I don't know, but he seems to be nice when he's Bilbo and in Dance with a Stranger.
I hope so, yes. Ian Holm, who was... Do you know what he was Oscar nominated for?
No. Chariots of Fire?
Yeah, yes, Chariots of Fire.
It was, okay, good. Whew, I'm not a complete loser.
No, not at all. You're doing very, very well. The next one, there's 3 Oscar-nominated performers in this alongside Lesley, and it is Misbehaviour.
So Keira Knightley for Pride and Prejudice. My girl, Jessie Buckley for oh my God, Lost Daughter. My mind went blank. And I assume if you're listening to this post, March next year or whenever, February next year, we'll also should say Women Talking. And Greg Kinnear for As Good as It Gets.
Yeah, fabulous. You're also neglecting Kira's other Oscar nomination, but that's okay. One apiece.
Oh my God, of course, for Imitation Game. Imitation Game, yes. Yeah. Really, I really love her in that film. She's someone I'd like to come back into films.
Yeah, come back. Give us more. Give us the A game.
And then I'm afraid when I look, I'm like, oh, she's still working, and I just ignore her movie.
Yeah, you're like, oh my God, look at all these. Oh, she definitely is still working. That's for sure.
Oh shit. Okay, well then I apologise. I need to come up to speed.
I think it's just sadly they've maybe not been the most exciting of her filmography in the past few years. Okay, next one. 3 here as well. This is Maleficent, the first one.
So, another girl of mine, Imelda Staunton, for Vera Drake. And then we have Angelina Jolie for Girl Interrupted, Changeling. I'm sure she's other nominations.
No, that's it. It's those 2.
Oh, so that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, are we said the first one, did you say, or the third one? Or the second one?
Say that again.
Which Maleficent are we talking about?
The first one.
Oh. My God, like, Jesus, I can't think of anyone else that's in that movie. I know, like, I can think of all the people, but none of them are Oscar nominated. There must be some... It's like Anthony Hopkins or someone like that as an old grandfather in it or something, but I couldn't tell you who it was.
Okay, so this is a bit of a trick. It's the narrator. Do you know who the narrator is?
Oh, is it Julie Andrews or Angela Lansbury or someone like that?
No, I wish it was. But it is currently seen in The Menu.
Rafe Fiennes?
No, it is a female
Janet McTeer?
actor. It's Janet McTeer.
Is it Janet McTeer? Okay, well, there you go. We got Albert Nobbs, which I'm obsessed with her in that. And Tumbleweeds.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Tumbleweeds is a lovely film. And then finally, so this is not a film, so this is a bit tricky, but I reckon you'll get this nice and easy. So this is Mike Leigh films. And there are 5 nominees we're looking for, which I hope I've got it right, that there are just...
Like 4 Mike Leigh films.
There are 5 actors she's worked with in Mike Leigh films, to my count, that have Oscar nominations.
So, like Jim Broadbent in Iris is included. Is that, yeah?
There we go, yes.
So then Imelda again, of course, for Vera Drake.
Yeah.
Marion Jean-Baptiste for Secrets and Lies.
Yeah.
Brenda Blethyn for Secrets and Lies and Little Voice. So Timothy Spall hasn't been nominated crazily. James Corden mercifully? Don't know. Anyway, thankfully has not been nominated for an Oscar yet. Oh, of course. It's Sally Hawkins in Vera Drake, and she is nominated for Shape of Water and also for Blue Jasmine.
You got it. There we are. Fabulous work. You absolutely smashed that one. Gifts in abundance for you and kindness from all this festive season.
Aww.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, listeners. Yeah, everyone just be kind. Okay, so now I'm going to grant you the ability to also have a birthday wish. And what would you love to see Lesley do next in our final, I guess, bit of the episode?
So sort of inspired by her work in Let Him Go, but kind of also from Phantom Thread, the energy she possesses, the kind of charisma and danger. I would love to see her playing a cult leader, and I'm going to say in a film directed by Jane Campion. I want a Jane Campion film about a cult where Lesley Manville is the leader of the cult.
Sounds hot. Sounds really great. And I mean hot as in, like, not the Paris Hilton sort of like good, just mean like it sounds really hot. Like that sounds like that could be explosive.
Oh, yes, it will be.
Mine is kind of bringing it back to comedy and a sort of specific sort of comedy. So I'm thinking of pairing her with Sharon Horgan, who has just had Bad Sisters on Apple TV, you know, Motherland, Catastrophe, very great at kind of situational comedy drama sort of things, bringing out these sort of broad characters in a really fun, insightful, touching way. And Lesley Manville, like, I'm imagining something along the lines of Lesley is just retiring and trying to figure out how to spend her time now that, like, you know, she doesn't have work to do. And I just think there could be something really fun, like she like overcompensates by like taking on too much, or she, you know, tries to get engaged with like maybe her kids or her child and their grandchildren's lives, and they're like, no, get away, you do your own thing. She takes up hobbies, and like something happens and clicks that brings her into this sort of I don't know, something that will push her full throttle into a proper storyline. But I just think that could be really fun, and you could have loads of fun supporting characters in it. And yeah, don't know. I think Sharon Horgan and Lesley Manville would be a good match.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing selection. Top of their game. 2 ladies at the top of their game.
Yeah, and maybe she like explores her sexuality or something, you know, and it's, I don't know, something really, really fun. Not that she hasn't explored it before, but more like Fiona Shaw rocks up, and if Fiona Shaw rocks up, you're going to be like, well, I want to sleep with you, so I don't know. Something really fun, something great, exciting, brilliant, yeah. So I would love that. But to be honest, I'd be delighted. Anything that Lesley will do, I will watch. Like, I've even seen both Maleficents, even though I badmouthed them earlier. I've seen nearly all of the films, so perhaps she'll get to work with Mike Leigh again on stage or film. Who knows? That would be wonderful. Although he was talking about not being able to get funding anymore. Do you remember? Did you read that? That was like last year.
There was something to that effect, yeah. But I think that's
because Peterloo was such an expensive flop.
Oh, really?
Are you saying Mike Leigh's lying?
I think so.
Yeah, he's a liar. That man's a liar. And on that note, what a nice way to like end the episode. Claiming people are lying. Where can people find us?
If you look in the cracks in your settee, we will be there.
Ooh, that sounds really pervy. I don't like that.
Oh God! Why must you take everything so
I thought you were also going to say the
literally?
cracks in Michael's faces because he's old.
Oh my God, that'd be much better. God, I get lost in there for centuries, though no one would ever find us there. The real answer to your question is probably on social media. If Twitter is still a thing, of course, who knows? Instagram too, though. You can find us at don'tknowher_pod. You can also email us. Maybe things are just going to get more old-fashioned again, and you can get us at don'tknowherpod@gmail.com. Find us there.
Yeah, and you can send your letters, your post to us too at some point, I'm sure. And by owl. Isn't that what they do in Harry Potter? Love the idea of an owl delivering post. Well, as always, Scott, thank you so much for joining me for this, and thank you, listeners. It's been a real joy, and this will be the last episode of 2022. We've had so many highs and I was going to say highs and lows. We've had no lows, just highs. And yeah, please, if you haven't listened to other episodes, please do champion, whatever, like share any episodes that you've enjoyed on your social media channels. That seems to be a big way people have been finding us. And yeah, thank you for listening, whether you're a first timer or a returning listener. It means the world to us. And we will be back next year, early next year in January, with more exciting people to talk about that we will be cherishing and celebrating. So until then, have a wonderful break over the Christmas period, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, happy birthday, Michael, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of our lovely listeners.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.